now that Curtis has just given us all, I think, CBA 101, 201, 301, and graduate school, right? So, very exciting. That's, you know, as well done as any presentation I've ever seen on CBA, so thank you. Very clear. What I thought I would talk about a little bit, first of all, Curtis was very sweet. I told him that I was going to take issue with the term expert, and he went ahead and took it on himself. The reason that I wanted to mention that was not because it's my job and goal to go around nitpicking on wordsmithing on people's bios, but because I think it's important. Well, two things. One is I've worked with lawyers for many years, and they don't want anybody who's not a lawyer saying they're a legal expert. So, I want to, you know, exclude myself from that kind of a claim. But no, more seriously, I think it's really important that we all understand that expert is often a term that is used to make us feel that we can't learn it. That the learning is there for special people, and it's not for us. And I have made my job, my career, my life around the belief that if there's information out there and I pay attention and I listen hard and I ask the right people, I can learn it. And I really want us all to have that belief and that self-confidence. I think that, you know, one thing that we need to know about accumulating expertise and getting the information that we want in order to achieve goals, sometimes you need a little time, right? You know, if there's a 40-page document to be read that's explaining, you know, how Whole Foods is coming in or how the bridge or whatever it may be, these documents, heck, sometimes I think lawyers are paid by the word, right? They're very long, they're very complicated. Sometimes we need a little time, A, to read it ourselves, maybe multiple times, B, to share it with those that we trust, C, sometimes to get other people to advise us. And what I have found, I spent the last 7 years working at the Sugar Law Center for Economic and Social Justice. And one thing I will say is any of you that is working on community benefits in any regard can do no better than to bring in their folks as your advisors. They are true blue, extremely responsive to community input. And I say that even though I used to work there, because I know the team that I was lucky to be a part of. But one of the things that I say is that because I wasn't a lawyer, but I was working at a law center, I spent 7 years with my main job being to nag lawyers. And what I want to say about that is lawyers can be extremely helpful when you need to slow things down. And slowing things down is often a key tool to gathering your power and achieving goals for your community. So now, you know, when you get the right lawyer and you want to move fast, that lawyer will make things happen fast. But there are all sorts of ways to gain yourself time. And this goes back to what I'm trying to say about none of us needs to be an expert. What we need to be is someone who cares enough to pay attention and find the resources and the information. All right, so that's the first thing that I wanted to say. And then, if I might, and again, this is sort of in the broader context of putting a framework on it. You tell me if I'm going on too long, okay, Curtis? But I wanted to talk just a little bit about sort of two big concepts, and one is power and one is trust. And everything that I have to say, I think, dovetails really well with what Curtis said, so I loved his introduction. The basic concept for community benefits, in my view, is it usually applies in projects where all sorts of people can see the benefits the project would provide for the large, broad region, right? And so you can get support for it from throughout the region. But the costs and the burdens of the project are going to hit in a very narrow local area. And so it becomes very easy for momentum to build. And well, we all see what's good about this, you know, let's say Southfield understands that it would be great to have trucks coming through Delray, you know, delivering just in time for manufacturing. Bloomfield Hills may see it, but the question is, what do the folks in Delray experience? And how can they get their voices heard? And I'm not trying to steal your your thunder, Simone. But so I think part of what we're looking at whenever we're talking about community benefits, and as I think Angelina is going to talk about, that there are ways to achieve community benefits that aren't necessarily a legal agreement. There are ways of getting your voice heard. But I think what we're looking at in all of these instances is ways that the small local group can make its voice heard. So I'm going to give a really crude, dopey analogy, but one that I think probably all of us have either experienced or heard stories about. First time I went to buy a car, I was in my 20s. Certainly wasn't going to buy any kind of a new car. It was going to be, used, bottom of the line at the used car lot. And my mother said to me, my mother is the world's best negotiator. I mean, to this day, 25 years later, she's the person that I get to help me out when I'm buying a car. But she said, you can't get a serious price from a sales rep at a car dealership unless you are seriously willing to walk away. If you're standing there and you're chatting away and he or she is giving you information and you have no internal belief that you could walk away, there's no way you're going to get the best that that person has to offer because they know you're there. You're there and you ain't going anywhere. At the same time, and this part my mother didn't tell me because I think she thought it was obvious, but I'm going to bring it up for this context. At the same time, if you walk into a car dealership, and seriously, you're not really potentially going to buy. You either don't have your credit, quite at the level that it needs to be, or you actually haven't really decided whether you want an American car or a foreign car, or you really live right off a rail line, and so you don't really need it. Well, don't you think they can tell when you're just kicking the tires? They can, and they are not going to be dealing with you. Any intelligent salesperson at a car dealership is going to stop talking to the person who's not a potential buyer and go focus all their attention on the person who really might. All right, so what's the point here? The point is that if you really want to get somewhere on community benefits, I fully believe, and I learned this frankly from Simone, your group has to be credible. You have to be able to be believed that you might withhold your approval and you might make a big fuss about what's wrong with this plan. The developer has to believe that you could be a real problem. On the other hand, if the developer believes that you are nothing but troublemakers and you're nothing but problems, and there's no way he's going to win you over because you just can't stand to see anything happen, he's also got no reason, or she has no reason to talk to you. And so I think that part of what you need to do is develop their belief that you have enough power to say no, but that you also have enough power that if you say yes, it will help their development. And therefore, it's worth it to them to build a level of trust with you, like what Curtis was talking about in terms of when you sit at the table, you may not like everything the other person said, and I've been on the rough edge of Linda's tongue, so I know that you can sometimes feel like, ooh, do I want to keep going? But that people will trust that if you stick with it, they're going to get value out of your being in the room. So, just before I finish, do I have another couple minutes? Okay. I just wanted to talk about what I think, and I think this will all probably show up again in the other panelists' comments, but I guess I wanted to talk about, so let's suppose that you have in your group a true belief that you might really be willing to say yes, and you might really be willing to walk away, okay? What do you do to make those honest, sincere beliefs visible and persuasive to the folks on the other side? And there may be other elements, but these are the ones that I came up with in terms of being able to accumulate and demonstrate power, all right? The most basic is a number of people, right? If you're living in a block that people are talking about demolishing, and there's only 3 houses left on that block, the others have all been foreclosed and, are derelict, and there's only 10 people living in those 3 houses, if the greater benefits to the larger community are going to affect 10,000 people, you may not get very far. I mean, and that's just, you know, as I say, keeping it real. On the other hand, if you can get, let's say, 1,000 people that live in the 20-block radius around your block, and they believe that the demolition of your block will affect their lives very seriously, 1,000 people is enough to make a real difference. So the first point is the number of people who care about the issue, right? The second is the definition, the very specific definition and documentation of what is the damage. What are the negative outcomes to your community that will occur through this development? Very specifically, and the examples that you gave, the Parkside Homes folks, they understood exactly what it was that they wanted to prevent. Being able to articulate that, agree on it, and communicate it is incredibly important. Similarly, being able to define what would be adequate mitigation, or what would be a good way to address these problems that would seem like an acceptable solution, or at least a journey toward the solution. Both of these elements of the what's so bad about it and what could be so great about it, honestly, you need media and you need public influence. You need that clear message to go beyond your 300, 500, 1,000 people who care. It needs to go to the 10,000, 100,000 people so that they share and understand your point. So media, whether it's paid media, earned media, social media, there's all sorts of ways of getting your message out. But if you're serious about gaining benefits for your community and your neighborhood, you need to give thought to whom and how you're getting your message out. And then the other three elements that I would describe in terms of accumulating and demonstrating power. One is the power of unions, and in particular, construction and building trade unions. If unions understand your goals to be congruent with theirs, and if you're willing to put some of their priorities and their needs into your list of demands and goals, they can add tremendously to your firepower as you go through the process. And so I think that we tend to, and I don't know how this is elsewhere in the country, but I know around here there tends to be community and unions, and a lack of understanding that some of the very same people are in those two entities. So, and I think again, Simone will give some examples of this, but if you can bring them to understand and to work with you, that's another source of power. And the two others that I would say, one is, of course, government channels. Understand what the paths and processes of government are, when and how government officials have to listen to you, what sways them. And finally, and this is where my friends at Sugar Law come in, there has to be at least some possibility that you could litigate and slow the whole thing to a crashing halt. I don't think litigation is virtually ever it's certainly never the first step, and I hope most of the time it isn't even the last step. But again, it's a matter of credibility, that if you were willing and able to sue, and if you had the right lawyers around, that can make a developer take you very seriously. So finally, the only other thing that I would add, and then I'm eager to hear what the other panelists have to say, is this goes back to Curtis's point about a win-win. When CBAs are presented properly, especially to local governments, but I think also just as much to developers who are smart, as it sounds like Whole Foods was, they can really provide what you might call a halo effect. Everybody these days has to care about what their public image is. And so if they can come to believe not just that you've got the stick to hit them with if they're not doing what you like, but that you would be happy to give 1,000 interviews saying how wonderful they are when they come through. And I don't mean that in a sarcastic kind of way. I take at Curtis's word that when Whole Foods came through with this, the folks who've been working with them felt great. So what we want to do is make visible both the negative consequences of not coming to the table, but also the fantastic positives of working together for a better local and broader community.